Hello, hello, hello. Hustle from Home is back where it all started in our homes still. It's Josh Ellis, editor-in-chief of Success Magazine.
And Amy Anderson, the side hustler columnist of Success Magazine and founder of Anderson Content Consulting, coming to you live from the exciting venue of my home office.
Amy, I gotta say, as we're recording here, episode 4 already, and I'm getting ready to put the new issue of Success, the July-August issue, to bed. I loved your most recent column about how side hustling can be so valuable for people during in the midst of a recession, which I think that we're all experiencing right now.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, it can be a time when everyone feels like, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't start anything. Maybe no one's spending any money. Maybe I won't be able to find customers. And actually, the opposite is true. So many companies and small businesses were founded during recessions or during difficult economic times. So I think really now is the time to shut off that questioning voice in your mind of can it really work, and just go for it and see what's out there. And today's guest is perfect for this because he's going to dive deep into some things like how to find those first customers and what do you really do to test your idea. Is it the right time?
Yeah, I think if you are in a position of needing to make some money on your own, go independent, be a solopreneur, start your side hustle now, then what stops a lot of people is they lack validation, proof that it's going to work. They have an idea, but they don't know how to take that idea and make it a fully fledged product or service. So today we're talking to Brandon White, and he is no novice when it comes to taking that idea and turning it into a profitable business.
He's not at all. And he started actually his first business around his love of fishing, which my 8-year-old son would greatly admire. And, he started at a time when the internet was brand new, and he launched something online, which I'm sure felt really scary at the time too. And he's going to talk to us some about that. And then he later went on to sell some companies, have some incredible experience with some major household names that you'll all recognize. And I think that one of the greatest things about his experience is that he's not afraid to say, hey, I've made mistakes along the way. So his success has come with some failures.
Yep, he is, as you just said, Amy, a serial entrepreneur. His story is really full of lessons on seeing a need in the market and pivoting as need be to changes in the world, capitalizing on that momentum. So I'm excited to introduce him. Brandon, it's so great to have you on Hustle from Home. How you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. I'm excited. It's a whole new experience, everybody being at home.
Now,
Right?
It is different. I just mentioned that your first business venture was all about your passion for fishing. How talk to us at first about how that came about and what do you fish for?
Well, that story, yeah, I always say I can't figure out if I opted into being an entrepreneur or entrepreneurship found me. But after college, I thought I was going to become a lawyer, and that didn't work out for a lot of reasons. And everything happens for reasons, so thank goodness it didn't. And I was actually working on a tree nursery, and my mom pretty much, I think, saw me working there and thinking, I can't believe I just busted my rear to send my son to college, and he took out all these school loans, and he's going to do this. So she said, you got to go back to school. So I went back to school, and I was really lucky to go to a college on the Eastern Shore of Maryland and lived on the water actually all through college and fished. And I thought that there should be a fishing magazine that catered specifically to saltwater fishermen that did light tackle and fly fishing. And there really wasn't anything like that. So I just decided to build it, to be quite frank. And I went to the local publisher. I realized that I had, at that time, I think I had $800 in my bank account, like total. And there was no way that I was going to publish my first edition. And the guy was really kind and told me that. But there was this thing that I had played around with in college called the internet. And I had always done some computer programming and things. And I basically long and short, figured out that why couldn't we just put a magazine online? And I taught myself how to program, but then realized that that wasn't going to work, and went and got a second job doing finance on a spinach farm of all things, and used that money to hire a guy from the computing lab. And that is literally how the site took off. That was I started that when I started working on my master's. I eventually left. I did not finish initially my master's degree because I did the business. I think that was 1996, 97 timeframe.
Wow. So that was really early in the days of the internet. I mean, I remember about that time meeting the first person I knew who had an email account and thinking, what's this for? Like, just call somebody. I didn't get it. And I think a lot of people probably were still on the fence about that. How did you know that this was going to work? I mean, was there a way you kind of tested out this idea or found that it might be successful?
So originally, I was a tech nerd. So I was on bulletin boards in college. Our college was pretty forward leaning. I did have an email address when I was in college. I'm not that old. I started in my early 20s. So, but what we did was ultimately I stood up a site. I figured out how to code doing HTML. It was all flat files for any tech nerds out there. It was not just whip up it wasn't you stand up a WordPress site. You had to build WordPress, and we literally wound up doing that to build a CMS. But I stood up a site, and I reached out to a bunch of people that I saw on forums, and I would literally had a legal pad. I would go and write down their username and email address. I would go to my email program and one by one email them, and people started coming. I mean, and I built a forum because I thought that forums was going to be the way, or we called them bulletin boards, but that was the way that people were communicating. So I said, well, if I can create a bulletin board for these fishermen, and originally no one came, truthfully. So I just became 5 personalities, and I would talk to myself, and I didn't even know everything about fishing. I was a good fisherman, but I did not know everything. And I just had books. So I would ask myself a question. I would read the book. I would answer it as another person, and it worked. Didn't work right away. But I'm a pretty persistent, stubborn person, and I just kept at it. And eventually we got a very small group that started coming and leaving reports and talking about fishing. And then it really took off. And I can't remember all the specifics. Within the first year, though, we had gotten mentioned in a very well-known magazine in Maryland, which said, hey, there's this thing called, you can get fishing reports online. Can you imagine that? And that really put us on the map. And at that point, I figured out, I was like, oh, there might be something here. Now realize I had there was no model. There was no, you're going to run banners. You're going to have an email list. There was no model. I just said, let's put the magazine online. And I think back then there was we called it vertical portals of all things. It took off.
Our younger audience members would be blown away by some of the stories from Internet 1.0. While you're doing that, I think I'm just discovering AOL chat rooms as a middle schooler and getting into all sorts of trouble. It was a different time. While you're going through all this, and it's so bootstrapped, and there's not 1,000 examples of this model being proven. How do you build any kind of confidence that this is going to work out for you? As we're all as we think about a home hustle, a side hustle, we all want some confidence that's going to work, some validation. But you kind of started without all of that in place.
Well, I'll go back a little bit and say that I did validate the idea in the sense that I asked my community. One is I was the target audience. So when you talk about, I hate to use the word avatar because it's so overused and people don't actually understand how to do that correctly. But I was the target market. And my friends were the target market. So I asked them, if there was something like this, would you use it? And then I stood up literally a one-page website, quote unquote, with a bulletin board. And the validation is when people came. And to be completely honest, I tell entrepreneurs, and I think it's true, you have to believe that you can do what you're not sure you can do. And that intuitively does not make sense. But as an entrepreneur, you just have to think. And the truth is, I didn't think of myself as an entrepreneur. Like, I didn't put myself in that category. I put myself in, oh my gosh, I tested this idea. This could actually be a business that I get to go fishing all the time and make a really good living doing it. And that's what drove me. And the curiosity of, could this really work? Like, I almost in some cases couldn't believe that people were coming. I was thinking, oh my gosh, people are coming here every day. And those chat rooms that you were in, I was going into those chat rooms that were outdoors, which you'll remember, Josh, if you were on there, and maybe Amy as well. I was going into those with my wife, getting the AOL screen name, writing them down on legal pads, because you know that the screen name was just, all you had to do was add at AOL. Then I created my email list off of that, and I would email. There was no email programs, by the way, to email people. You had to do that through your, like, load 10 people into your freaking whatever email program you had. And I would email, which is now called spam, people, and they would write back and say, thank you so much, Brandon, for telling me about this resource. And that, like, to this day, if you said, Brandon, what is the number one, what is the biggest asset you had and what was the biggest mistake you made? It would be, one is my email list was the biggest. I still believe to this day, your email list is your biggest asset. And if you're not building it, you're nuts. And the biggest mistake I made, which was I didn't use it as effectively as I should have, in the sense that I did email on a weekly or biweekly basis, but I probably should have been, I should have been emailing people at least three times a week. But that's how I built, that's truthfully how I built it. Even to the day that I sold that company to a large media company, I was only spending $50 a month on marketing.
Wow.
And I did that through the email list and the organic SEO strategy, which I had built. And if you believe the modern tools, because I went in recently and tested a little while ago, and we were doing about $500,000 a month worth of organic SEO. So if you had to pay, you would have to pay that much money to get the placement where we had it.
Wow. See, now, as people are listening who may be thinking about starting something, all of that sounds maybe a little out of reach for them, or if someone's trying to scale something. And I think that one of the important things to point out here is that your timing was really key to this, right? Being on the front end of something. And like you're saying, being at a time when you could basically spam everyone to get them on your email list, and times have really changed. So talk to us a bit about the timing of an idea and why that's important, and how you feel like that may have made a difference, even in future ventures, like the current venture you're doing now. And where does that play a part? How can our listeners take advantage of the right timing?
Yeah, the first thing I would say to that is I'm headstrong and I'm driven, but I'm not magical. I'm like every listener out there. You can do this. This is not impossible. It is not as easy as some of the, let's say, advanced marketers out there would lead you to believe. But if you do stick with it, you can build it. And I would say that I did, you make your own luck because you work hard. I did get to ride a wave there, but it wasn't an easy wave. I mean, we did raise money. The market, the internet.com crashed in 2001. I bought that company back with every last cent that I had. So I did not have a lot of money, and I bought it back and rebuilt it and ultimately turned it into a cash cow. and sold it to a big media company with a strategy that we had. And I had made a bunch of mistakes along the way, but and today is a little different. But I built other companies in the modern day internet world, and I would say that the fundamentals are still pretty much the same, other than I think that organic SEO has become harder, but it's still possible. It is completely possible because my company, I have people that I've trained, and we're getting tens of thousands of organic visitors every month. So you can do that. And the other thing I think that has changed a little bit is that you do have to do paid advertising. But if the biggest mistake that I think entrepreneurs make is they don't run their numbers. So if you don't run your numbers, then you don't know your key KPIs, your key performance indicators. You don't understand your customer acquisition cost. You don't understand your customer lifetime value. Then you are going to have a failing strategy. But if you understand those things and you create sales funnels that allow you to monetize your traffic, then you can very successfully use paid advertising to grow your list, to grow your customers. The other thing I'll say is this. I think too often people believe that it's just the idea and marketing that create customers. But at the end of the day, one of my mentors told me, all you have to do is solve a problem for someone, and that problem has to be big enough that they will pay you money for. And guess what? There's no magic. You don't have to trick people. All you have to do is tell them you'll solve their problem to that target, and they will pay you. Now, you have to understand your message and whatnot, but I think that's what's getting lost a lot in the current, even in the digital marketing or online world, is it's just getting lost that, hey, you just have that everybody's idea is good. No, not everybody's idea is good. And you know what? That's okay, because I've failed like at 15 times at companies. It just so happens that the 2 that I had made a bunch of money. But I think too often there's this, oh yeah, because you have that idea that it deserves to be turned into a business. And that's not always true.
I want to get back to what you were saying about running your numbers in just a moment, and how that's the biggest mistake that a lot of people make when they go to market. But along the lines of what you finished up talking about just there, it strikes me that so many people have sort of a mindset that all the good ideas are taken, and people who were getting into entrepreneurship in the late 90s probably thought something kind of similar. And 50 years ago, people probably thought something kind of similar. And so in a way, is it really just about your mindset and convincing yourself that there's possibilities out there?
Yeah, that all the good ideas aren't taken. And furthermore, it's not all about the idea. It's about the execution. You have the best idea in the world and not execute it, and not understand how to present that to your customers, and you will fail. So I'd suggest there's a combination of things there. And there's plenty of things that emerge, and inefficiencies that exist in the world that you can take advantage of through streamlining some process. Or just because there's competition doesn't mean that that's bad. That means that there's probably a big market there, and your challenge is to carve out what niche you want to own. And there's always a bigger part or a niche of a bigger market that you can go own and build a really good, successful business. I would also tell listeners, there's this, I live in Silicon Valley. The dream here and the marketing message here is, if you don't build a billion, it has to be multi-billion now here. If you don't build a multi-billion-dollar company, you're not successful. And that's not true. My fishing business, I did make really good money, but I didn't have a G5 jet. But I'm still pretty happy and got a good exit and things like that. And I'm living in Half Moon Bay and enjoying the beach. But I think that you as an entrepreneur have to don't have to shoot for the moon to be successful. You can have a business that does $1, $2, $3, $7 million that throws off cash, and you are successful. And you can live a really good life that way.
I think about, like the beer industry, right? 10 years ago, it was Miller, Coors, Bud, and then all of a sudden, all these craft brewers came out of nowhere, and none of them are competing with InBev by any stretch, but there's 10,000 of them all of a sudden just within the last decade that they're making a living for themselves and creating jobs for other people.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great example. I mean, there's examples that happen every day. Who would ever think that the Dollar Shave Club was going to take Gillette out? And they did. I mean, literally, right? And we can keep going down the line. Who would ever think that you were going to replace Coca-Cola soda? And now you've got 50 Otwala started right here in Half Moon Bay. Whoever thought that you were going to reinvent the camera and build GoPro, which actually Nick built here in Half Moon Bay as well. Like, there's just so many things. And one of my professors in business school, he put a bottle of water on my desk, and I keep a bottle of water on my desk to this day. And he said, look at this water. It was a bottle of Voss water. If you're familiar with Voss water, it comes in a glass thing, and they charge like $9 for it. And it's probably completely not environmentally friendly. But the bottom line and the message is if you can't figure out how to sell that water, if someone can figure out how to sell that water for $8, and you're telling me that all the good ideas are taken, then you're just not being creative. I would just suggest to people that fix a problem that you have that's big. I will tell you that every single business that I've ever started and or invested in is because in general, I have that problem. So I can relate to it. So I would think about that. But I'd also say that you've got to test that idea, and you've got to test that idea really quickly and with a lot of people, not your friends and family. With people who are outside your circle. And the test is they give you money. They don't tell you that they will buy it. Everyone will tell you they will buy it until you ask them to buy it. And until you have exchange of money for that product, you have not validated your idea.
That's a great point. And I want to circle back around because I think that's a big mistake that people make when trying to validate their idea. So I want to circle back around to that question that both you and Josh touched on, which is the biggest mistake people make when going to market. What would you say is that biggest mistake?
They want to do all the sexy things, which is get yourself in the press and do advertising, and they haven't built their business plan. They haven't run their financials, and they have no strong foundation to base that off. And if you don't have that map, in my opinion, if you do not have that map, and I do not care whether you are doing affiliate marketing on Amazon, I've done all these things. Because when I built my first company, we had multiple revenue streams, and I've tried everything to make money on the internet to try to make some extra income for myself. So I think without that plan, whether, like I said, affiliate marketing on Amazon, doing drop shipping on Shopify, running a blog, building a product, selling a service, you absolutely have to have a business plan with financials. Otherwise, you are just shooting in the dark. I tell people, so we all use Google Maps. So do you pull out of your driveway? Do you stop, look at Google Maps, remember it, and then turn it off? No, you never do that, because when you go, Google Maps says there's traffic here, and you've got to take a way around. So you're always looking at the map. You're adjusting, the map is adjusting, but you're always looking at that map. And without that map, you probably won't get there. Or if you're in San Francisco, you're going to get stuck in traffic and wind up in traffic for an hour and a half that you could have gone around. So, and that's, for me, when I help mentor or bring in apprentices, whatever you want to talk about, is are entrepreneurs willing to go and do that? Because you know what? It's not sexy and it's hard.
Amy, do you feel like when you were starting up, and compared to some of the things that side hustlers can get into, you're probably running a sort of old school business. It's service, it's freelancing, and you're providing content for people. And we have a lot of listeners who are going to be doing some lo-fi activities, independent salespeople, things like that. Do you feel like you hit some of those milestones and were tracking them as you went?
Absolutely. And I think a lot of that comes down to what Brandon just said about having that plan right out of the gate, because once you have that plan and you've mapped out where you want to go, you set some of those milestones yourself. It's going to be different for everyone, like you're saying, depending on what kind of business you're setting out to do and what kind of goals you have. Maybe $1 million sounds huge to you. Maybe you're just aiming for your first 5 figures, right? Depending on where you're at, that milestone may be different. But I think that for me, when I looked at my plan and I looked at where do I want to be in a certain amount of time, it was things like, getting your first high paying client or getting your first, virtual assistant. That may be something for someone. There's some milestones in there that, like I said, are tailored to your business. But if it frees you up, I think, to reinvest your time or resources back into your business, that's a significant milestone to shoot for. I'd love to hear, Brandon, some of your thoughts on some milestones that you feel are essential on that journey early on.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you've said there. And I think the early milestones are get customers to validate your idea, and you're not going to outsource that. As a founder of whatever size business, I do not care. I mean, I know some people who have $500,000 businesses that throw off $150,000 a year, if not more, and are living a great life. So for listeners out there that say, oh, this doesn't apply to me. I had someone say this the other day, like, financials don't apply to me, Brandon. Really? I don't understand that. So we're either going to get there or not. But I think the milestones for me is to get 20 sales, and to, by that 20th sale that you or I have done, is to start to develop a process. Whether that process is you're advertising on Facebook and you're building that sales funnel from your ad to your landing page to your getting that person into a cart, they abandon, you come back. Or if you're doing sales over the phone as a service business, I love service business because initially you don't need any startup cash, is figure out what those steps are and how long it takes you to acquire a customer. Because once you understand that, now you have a system that you could hire someone, I think, and say, here's my process, here's what's worked. It's worked 10, 15 times. So those are really the milestones for me are around sales, and getting your idea, your product as an MVP out there, regardless of what it is.
So you mentioned 20 customers. Let's talk about how you find and gather this bucket of people who you're going to pitch your prototype or your reasonable first product to. How do you kind of start by building that list?
The first thing I would do, because every listener on here, I would bet, has an Instagram account, a Facebook account, a LinkedIn account, a combination or one of at least one of those. And you just ask. And I will tell that most people won't ask because it feels uncomfortable. And if it feels uncomfortable, then you should know you're doing the right thing. You will feel uncomfortable. That's what I tell everybody. But I just go to Facebook and be like, hey, does anyone, in my wall, I would post, does anyone know, or does anyone have this problem? I'll give you an example. Current software company where I'm a co-founder called FileFinder, we basically said, hey, is there anybody out there who's tired of looking for files in their email or can't find a file they know they have but can't find and waste a lot of time doing it? And I originally put that out to some of my classmates from business school, and a whole bunch of them came back. So then I took that poll and said, okay, would you be willing to test a product? And second of all, can I interview you to understand what your job is? Because I want to understand what your daily life is. Do you use email all the time? Do you use Slack and Jira and Google Drive and Dropbox? What does that look like? And literally just got on the phone and started interviewing. And then when you get that person, you say, hey, can you refer me to someone who you know in your circle who might also have that problem? And then you start pulling that string, and that will grow, but it's not easy, and it will take you time, and you got to do the work. But it's just starting right there.
I love that, and I love that you use a very well, like Josh said, a LoFi approach to that, right? This is something anyone can do, and whether you're selling your services as a freelancer or whether you're in, direct selling, you have products, whatever you're doing, whether you've created something on your own, you can reach out to people. And I also really like that you said it's going to be uncomfortable, because I think a lot of people have this feeling like, well, I'm not a natural saleswoman, or I don't have a background in this, so people aren't going to take me seriously. They have so many self-doubts, and then they let that stand in their way. And really what it is just that we all feel a little uncomfortable putting something out there. And once you realize that everyone feels that way, it takes off some of the pressure. And also it's in how you approach people, I think, right? So especially I think if you're starting out and you're needing support, can you transfer this same type of thinking to how do you get maybe the funding you need, the investment you need? How do you, if you do need some extra cash, where do you go for that? And can it still be this kind of lo-fi, let me just reach out and ask for help kind of approach?
I would say the answer is yes. So a few things. And I would argue that the lo-fi approach is so accessible. Like today, I mean, think about this. You can go, anybody who's listening right now, with your Gmail account, which probably about 50% of you have, and if you don't, you can get one, and sign up for your own YouTube channel. And you can review these AirPods right here on that channel, get an affiliate link, get traffic, and make money with no investment. That's crazy, because we used to have to advertise in the classified ads in newspapers to do that, or in a print magazine. So you can do that. The second thing that I will say, and I'm not advocating this, I'm just suggesting that I did this in my first company, and you can do this, is you can use the credit card to your advantage. If you need money. Now, when entrepreneurs tell me, I need to raise money, every company that I've started, I did not raise money out of the gate. The fact of the matter is I was a venture capitalist. I am an angel investor. And the truth is that most businesses do not get funded on an idea in general. They don't. You've got to have traction so you can throw that out the window. So the question becomes is how are you going to bootstrap it? Well, what did I do? I went and got a second job and paid the guy in the computing lab. Why? Because I wanted my idea to become a reality. As it relates to credit cards, think about, I didn't have enough money to actually get web space at Errol's Internet. That'll age me a little bit. But Errol's Internet was $800 for like 8 megs of space. And I didn't have $800. That was like my whole bank account. So I put it on the credit card, and then I figured out that I could pay the credit card with the credit card. Again, contact your financial advisor. If you're listening to this, I'm not advocating it. I'm just saying that it can work that way. And the other thing I'll say is that figure out how you can turn your product into a service to start, because as a service person, you can collect money instantly, right? And ask for money. Hey, I need a third of that up front. People aren't comfortable doing that, but it gives you that cash flow. So I just don't buy it. I'm super, if you asked people about me, they tell you that I was, I hate to use the word cheap, but frugal would be a better word, is in the beginning, you've got to be creative. And I think that's when some of your best ideas, and that's when some of the best guerrilla marketing things that I ever learned. Had I not learned how to figure out how to build an email list, guerrilla marketing, and I could just buy it or just, I wouldn't have that foundation to fall back on, especially in times like we are today where, we find ourselves in a challenging economic situation.
Having, taken companies to scale a couple times in really, really exponential ways, do you look back on this early period, the validation period, as, what weight do you give it in the general course of the company? Is it the most crucial time, and how do you how do you weigh it in terms of the overall success that you've experienced?
Well, it's everything. I divide things into, people cut and dice on, building a company in many ways. I sort of say it's survive, success, and scale. So in the beginning, you're just surviving. You're just trying to figure out how to validate it. If you do not validate your idea with sales and you decide to move on to the next stage, then you ultimately are setting yourself up for failure because you're trying to scale something that you never really validated. And there's this thing it's overused too, but people call product market fit. If you do not find that product market fit, then and you still move on to invest money in marketing and everything else, it's just a failing strategy because you're marketing to a person that you don't even know who that person is. You don't even know what message to send them, and they're not buying. So I would argue that the beginning phase is the most crucial, and it's the most vulnerable for you as a person, right? Because there is nothing worse than having this great idea and 100 people telling you it stinks. Like that's just it's almost can feel devastating. But you have to decide if your goal is to build a business or to die on your sword because you're convinced, regardless that you've received no money for this trade, no money for this problem you're solving, that you're going to continue on. And I think it's that flexibility that you've got to have. It doesn't mean that your original idea isn't a good one at all. It just means that people apparently aren't valuing it enough to exchange money where you're going to be able to make a living off of it. So at that point, I would say what I tell people is you need to decide two things. One is if you really are passionate about it, then decide that it's going to be a hobby and a nonprofit. And that's okay. But understand that you've put it into that bucket in your life. And if you want to make money, then decide that you're going to have to pivot or change your course a little bit to figure out how to improve that product or service so that someone will pay you and you can make a living.
Well, Brandon, it has been awesome having you on. I think these are great lessons for everybody that's listening to us. You can find more of Brandon's resources and tools from his own podcast, courses, contact info, everything to reach out and get more from Brandon at brandoncwhite.com. We really appreciate it, Brandon.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really grateful for you having me on.
Great talking to you, Brandon.
Thank you.
We're grateful for all of you coming back for another week of Hustle from Home, and we will see you next week. So long.